Good day, students. Once again, I will be recording this question on the topic called ABC, which is activity-based costing, and it is just an ABC question. There's no integration, so I will be just doing activity-based costing, and it is vice versa traditional method. I want to highlight that we do have the traditional system. So now we will be doing both methods, calculating the cost per unit or per product using ABC and the traditional method. And then let me also go to the requirements, though I have already informed you of what is required. And the minute you see the cost drivers, you see the activity, you can easily identify that this is an activity-based costing. Then we are required to calculate the cost per product using a traditional absorption system when overheads are allocated according to the direct labor hours. So they say assume that direct labor hours is the base of calculating our overheads. Then after we are to calculate the cost per product using an ABC or activity-based costing system. And you will find sometimes in some of the question they will give you the third question and say compare the results of the ABC and with that of the traditional method, so that we can identify the significance or the necessity of adopting the system of ABC in a given company. So now, in this case, there is no comparison between the two systems. We are just calculating traditional method cost per product and calculating the cost per product using the ABC. However, we can also do that comparison in terms of looking at the cost per unit, which of the method overstate the cost for which product. But I will later on do another question that will also be doing the comparison and bringing that theory across. It says the following information relates to DC company for September. So this is information for the month of September. We have two products, which is common and special, and we are given the total information for the two products. We have units that were produced 6,000 and 2,000, and the total inventory produced was 8,000 units. Then we have direct material that was used, which is 180,000 and 110,000, and the total of the direct material came up to 290,000 rands. Take note of the fact that we are required to calculate the cost per unit. Be mindful of that. We are to calculate the cost per product meaning the cost for each of the products that we have. Meaning we will need to know the cost of the material that was used per unit, and for product common, and the cost of the material per unit of the product special. How do we do that at this point in time? We can take the cost of 180,000 and we divide this by 6,000, and 6,000 being the number of units that were manufactured, and here we divide by the number of units that were manufactured to identify how much is the cost of material to complete one unit of product common and special. So for common it will be 180,000. We divide this by 6,000 and we get to an amount of 30 rand, meaning the direct material cost per unit of product common will be 30 rand. For product special it will be 110,000. We divide this by the number of units that were manufactured, being 2,000, and we find out that the cost of material will be 55 rand. Then we go now 55 rand per unit of product special. Then we go to the direct labor. We are given the direct labor hours, and this is the total. You can say that it is total of 6,000 and total of 4,000, and the total for both of them hours became 10,000. And we are given the direct labor rate, meaning the number of hours it takes to complete or the rate in which our employees are being paid per hour. This is 30 Rand and 75 Rand. Our employees are paid this rate, meaning employees who are producing product common are being paid 30 Rand per hour, and employees who are producing the product special, they are being paid 75 Rand per hour. And this is a special product. It must be needing some specialized labors. Direct labor or with some expertise. Direct labor hours per unit. Remember, this is the rate per hour, not per unit. So now we need to know how many hours does it take to complete 1 unit. In this case, we are told that it takes 60 minutes. Remember, 60 minutes will be 60 over 60, meaning it will be equal to 1 hour. And here we are given information already in hours. So now it takes 60 minutes to complete 1 hour, which is 1 hour, and it takes 2 hours to complete 1 unit. So now when we are looking for the cost per unit, it will be 75 Rand for product special times by 2, meaning employees or the cost of labor, direct labor for product special will be 150. But for product common, it will be 30 times by 1, meaning the cost of labor per unit will be 30 Rand, because employees are being paid 30 Rand per hour, and they take 60 minutes to complete 1 unit. And that 60 minutes, remember, 60 minutes is equal to 1 hour. 60 over 6 is equal to 1 hour. So we don't multiply by the minutes, we multiply by the hours, because employees are being paid 30 Rand per hour, not per minute. So now hence the 60 minutes must be converted into becoming 1 hour. Then after we say 1 hour times by 30, that will give us 30 Rand per unit. So now that is the information that we have so far. Then after now we are given the number of setups, 30, 50, total is 80. Number of design changes, this is 12, 8, and 20. And number of purchase orders, 80, 120, and total 200. And the number of product tests being 300 and 700, and the total is 1000. So now these are the total columns. Remember, we only have 2 products, then the total of the 2 information goes to the total column. So now let us then proceed to the information that is necessary for ABC. And those who already know ABC, they will tell you that this information already relates to activity-based costing. This one has nothing to do with the traditional method. This already relates with ABC. And you can immediately say this is ABC. And again, this information relates the minute you see activity and you see cost driver, then you know that this is ABC. But there's something that is also necessary that will be used in this with regard to the cost. The cost total of 378,000 will be used when we are using or calculating our cost per unit in the traditional method. We have activity, which is setup, and the cost of setup was 80,000. And what drove that cost was the number of setup. And the design changes was 60,000, and the cost driver for that is based on the number of design changes. The more design changes are done, the more cost will be paid to our designers. Therefore now, that is why that is called the cost driver. It's something that drives the cost. Purchasing is the cost of 50,000, and it is based on the number of purchase orders. Obviously, purchase order does have the cost. To buy something, there is a purchase order. So the number, this will be based on the number of purchase orders. And we do have the number of purchase orders. It was 80, 120, and 200. And also when it comes to setups, the number of setups were given to us. Number of setups, it was 30, 50, and the total setups in overall was 80 in total. Then we have quality control, which the cost amounted to 48,000, and this is the number of product tests. And we do have the number of product tests, which was 300, 700, and 1000 was the total. So now meaning when these costs are allocated, they must be allocated using their cost drivers based on the number of cost drivers that are given in the information above. So now once again, the information on cost drivers has nothing to do with the traditional method. It will be used when we are dealing with the ABC. What is very crucial, okay, the other overhead is the other overheads. The other overheads is 140,000 rands, which is based on direct labor hours. And we already do have our direct labor hours that were given to us. And remember, we are referring to the total direct labor hours, 6,000 and 4,000. However, if you wanted, or if this total direct labor hours was not given, and you are given the number of hours to complete one unit, you could have said 60 over 60, and this will be 1 hour. 1 hour times by the number of units manufactured will give you the number of labor hours it will take to complete the 6,000 units. In this case, we in the special product, we know that it takes 2 hours to complete 1 unit. Therefore, now it will be 2 hours times by the number of units that were manufactured. 2 times by 2,000 will give you the same 4,000 hours that is required to complete the 2,000 units of product special. But fortunately, all the information is given to us. We have the total labor hours and the labor hours per unit. So now we will just jump and use the total, because that is what at the end we need in order for us to allocate the other overheads of 140,000, which is based on direct labor hours. Now our total overheads, it is 378,000. And when we are using the traditional method, this is the cost that we take. We don't, or the traditional system, we take the total overheads. We don't take the individual overheads that are based on the activity or the cost drivers. We take only the total in the traditional. And the minute now we deal with the cost drivers, this becomes ABC, this becomes APC, and this is applied when we are doing APC. This is applied when we are doing ABC. Just make sure that you take note of this. And also all this will be applied when we deal with ABC. All of this will be ABC, all of them. Now remember, one of the overheads, which was the other, was based on direct labor hours. Meaning now obviously the labor hours will also be used now when we are dealing with the ABC. So I'll also repeat this when I am responding to the second question. So now let me proceed in the next information. The special is a more complex product, and it requires more labor hours to produce and a greater number of setups relatives to the common product. So now they say the special product, it is requiring more of the labor hours in comparison with the common product. Then now we come to the requirement again now for the second term, knowing already now what we are required to do. We are to calculate the cost per unit using the traditional system, assuming that the direct labor hours is the base used to allocate our manufacturing overheads. Remember, the cost per product, I've already deleted now this part. The cost per product is made of 3 things. We are responding to requirement number 1 or number A, calculating the cost per product or for each of the product. We have 2 products, which is product common and product special. Product common and product special. We have direct material. We also do have direct labor. Then we have our overheads. We don't split our overheads according to the activities. No, we leave them as they are, because this is the traditional approach. So now we need to know how much is the direct material and how much is the direct labor. I think it was 55. Let me just confirm those figures, if it was 55 rand and 30 rand or not. So now when it comes to material, we did say we have the 180,000. Divide this by the number of units, which is 6,000 units. So now we say 180,000 is the total material, divide by the units that were manufactured. and the unit that were manufactured for product common was 6,000. So now the cost of material per unit was 30 rand of product common, and product special total was 110,000 rands. 110,000 rands. We divide this by the number of units that were manufactured, and that was a total of 2,000. So 110,000 divided by the units, that will give us 55 rand per unit. Then after we go to labor, and our labor, I think it was 30 rands. Why was it 30 rand? Because our direct labor rate per hour was 30 rand, and it takes 1 hour to complete 1 unit. Remember, 1 hour is 60 minutes. So now we said 60 divided by 60 will give us 1 hour, because the 30 rand is not per minute. If this was 30 rand per minute, therefore now we could just multiply by the minutes, but the 30 rand is per hour. So now we need to make sure that we convert the minutes into hours. Remember, this is direct labor hours per unit. The fact that they say hours, it doesn't mean everything will just be hours, but here they clearly stated that it is hours, but here it is given in minutes. So now hence we had to do that conversion. So now it was 1 times by 30, which gave us 30 at the same time. Then for the second one, it was 75 times by 2, and we said 75 times by 2 will be 150 rands. So the direct labor cost for the special product, it is 150. Then when it comes to our manufacturing overheads, remember, this is already per unit, per unit, per unit, and per unit. And if it wasn't per unit, that still wouldn't be a problem. We were just going to divide by the cost per unit at the end. Then we need to first calculate what we call predetermined overhead rate. And the predetermined overhead rate is what we call POR. And POR is budgeted manufacturing overheads. Divide this by budgeted base. And remember, we were required to calculate our cost per unit using the traditional method under the assumption that the direct labor is the base of allocating our manufacturing overheads. Assuming that direct labor hours is used to allocate our manufacturing overheads, or allocating overheads according to the direct labor hours. So now we first have to say how much is our manufacturing overheads. Our total manufacturing overheads, it is 378,000 rands. Remember, in this case, we don't take the individual overheads according to the activities. No, we don't deal with the activities yet. We only deal with the activity and the cost drivers when we do activity-based costing. Now we are using the traditional method. The traditional method takes all the overheads, all of them, and it divides them one base. And in this case, our base is said to be the direct labor hours. And our total direct labor hours, it is 10,000 hours. Here is total direct labor hours. 6,000 plus 4,000 is equal to 10,000 hours. So now we first need to determine what we call predetermined overhead rate. The rate per labor, direct labor hour. 378,000, divide this by 10,000. Divide this by 10,000, it will be 37 rand 80 cents per direct labor hour. Per direct labor hour. Now, the minute we get this, remember, this is the rate for both of the products, because the total of the overheads, which is the 378,000 of the overheads, is for all the products. Meaning the product common and the product special. So now we need to split this total of 378,000 of the overheads using our labor hours as the base of allocation. So now that we have done that, we need now to calculate the cost now, which is the cost per unit, which in this case, I think that there can also be a very, very short format. We have the product special, product common, which is 37 rand 80 cents. we can say 37 rand 80 cents times, remember this is 37 rand 80 cents per direct labor hour. Then the question will be, how many direct labor hours does it take to complete 1 unit? We said that will be 1 hour. So now if we multiply by 1 hour, that can give us the same 37 rand 80 cents as the overheads per unit of product common. But I don't want to take it from that dimension. I'll just use this as a test. If it doesn't, then I'll just analyze maybe what could be the reason. Now we first multiply this by the number of labor hours in total, which is the 6,000 labor hours. And if we multiply this by the 6,000 labor hours, which is 37 rand 80 cents, times this by 6,000 labor hours, let us check how much do we get. We get 226,800. Why am I multiplying this? Because I want to get into the total labor cost. And remember, this will be the total overhead cost for product common. And this is the total. And I'm looking for the cost per unit. So now I say, how many units do I have? Is 6,000. Remember, I multiplied by 6,000, I divide by 6,000, then obviously this will give me the same 37 rand 80 cents. So now meaning the cost per unit of product common of overheads will be 37 rand 80 cents. So now I can immediately come here and say 37 rand 80 cents. Then I come now to product special. Then product special, we are calculating the overhead, and the product special, it is 37 rand 80 cents. Then now we can say this multiply by 2 hours, because this is the rate per labor hour. And the question is then, how many labor hours does it, or direct labor hours does it take to complete 1 unit of product special? We know that it takes 2 hours. So now if the rate is already per direct labor hour, then I can multiply by the 2 hours. Therefore now this will give me the total or the sum of that, which will be 37 rand 80 cents times this by 2, and it is 75 rand 60 cents. Now we can also say 37 rand 80 cents times this by the total labor hours, which is 4,000 labor hours. If we multiply by 4,000 labor hours, let us check how much do we get. 37 rand 80 cents times this by 4,000 direct labor hours for product special. It will be 151,200. Remember, this is total, and I need it per unit. So now if I need it per unit, I'll say how many units does this company wants to manufacture. Then we have to say how many units. We divide this by 2,000 units and see if does it give us the same amount. It gave us 75 rand 60 cents. Again, we still get to the same 75 rand 60 cents that we have. So now either way, you are going to get to the same amount of 75 rand 60 cents. So the cost per unit of manufacturing overheads, it is 75 rand 60 cents for product special. So now we can draw the line here, draw the line, and draw the line, and draw the line, and we get to our cost per unit. Plus 150 plus 55 rand, and this gives us 280 rand 60 cents. And for product common, it will be 60, which is 30 plus 30 plus 37.80, and this will give me 97 rand 80 cents. So now this is the cost per unit using our traditional system. This is the cost per unit using our traditional system. Now that we have done the first requirement, then we go and respond to the second requirement. And the second requirement, we already know that we are to use the activity-based costing. And activity-based costing, nothing is complicated with this method. Very easy. Just apply the same principle of allocating overheads, but obviously using the cost drivers. So now we are responding to number 2. And number 2, which is B, we are still calculating the cost per unit. In this case, we are using ABC. I just want to highlight that previously we were using traditional method, using the traditional system. Here we are using the ABC system. Then we still have the two products, which is common and special. Remember, direct labor are not changing. They are just directly related to the product. And direct material, they don't change. So now these two costs are not to be allocated direct labor. So we had 30 Rand here, we had 30 Rand here, and we had 55 Rand here, and we had 150. These costs are not to be allocated. Then now we come to our overheads. ABC say that overheads must be allocated according to the cost drivers. Where are the cost drivers? According to the activities, sorry. Where are the activities is set up? So that will be the first one. We'll say setup. Then we go to the second one. Second one is design changes. Second one is design changes. And we go to the third one. Third one is purchases or purchasing. Then we go to another activity, quality control. The last one is other. One is quality control. Then the other overhead is called other overheads. So now these are the overheads or the activities that are driving the overheads. And it is very difficult to convert the activities to be per unit immediately. It's better you bring them into total. Then after you take the total, you divide by the number of units that were manufactured. So here I will not be telling the cost per unit, but you can see this is per unit, this is per unit, this is per unit, and this is per unit. But when it comes to these overheads now, when I'm using ABC, I will bring them in total, then after I convert them to per unit. So now my focus will be on that dimension as we speak. We have what you call cost pull rates. I normally call this cost pull rates as I was taught. We have what you call cost pull rates. Previously, we had POR, that was the rate, because it was one rate, so hence I don't call it a pool of rates. But here now I want to do all the rates for each of the products. So now we start with the setups. We start with the setup. Let me just change the color first. We start with the setup. And the setup cost is given to us as 80,000 and is based on the number of setups. And how many is the total number of setups? Number of setups, it is 80 Rand, but it is 80 setups, but 30 for product common and 50 for product special. Take note that is 34 common, 54 special, but total is 80. So my target is 80 because I need the rate. So now I say 80,000. Remember, 80,000 is the cost of the setup. The cost of the setup, it is 80,000. Divide by the number of setups, the total number of setups, and the number of setups in total for both products, it is 80. So now I divide here by 80. And when I divide by 80, I will get the rate. So I have my 80,000 divided by 80. This gives me 1,000 per setup. This will be 1,000 per setup. So now I have this 1,000 per setup. Then I need now to allocate this to each of the product. This is the rate, first of all, that I just have calculated. If I want, I can just draw all this without allocating and allocate later, but I prefer to allocate instantly. So now I have product 1, which is common. And now how do I allocate to common? I will say 1000, which is 1000 per setup, and I say how many setups do I have for product common? Setups for product common, it is 30. Then I multiply this by 30. Remember, 30 is inside that 80. I multiply by 30, then it will give me the cost of the setup for product common. Then I have 1000 times by 30. It gives me 30,000. This is the total overhead. Then I have second product, which is special. And the product special, remember, the rate does not change. It is 1000. And I multiply this by 50. What is 50? 50 is the number of setups for product special, which is the number of setups for product special. It is given to me as 50, as you can see there. Let me just try to clear my writing so that everything is visible. So now this is the number of setups for product special, the number of setups for product common. So I take the rate and I multiply by the number of setups for each of the product. Initially you divide by the total, then you multiply by the individual number of setups for each of the product. Therefore now, when I multiply, this will give me obviously 50,000. Meaning now, out of the 80,000 of the setups, which we have seen there, the cost, out of this 80,000 that we have seen, 30,000 is allocated to product common and 50,000 to product special, and we have seen that. So there we have 30,000 and 50,000. Then I can go and allocate immediately my 30,000 and 50,000. Remember, this is the total now. This is 30,000 and this is 50,000. Then now we are done allocating the setup cost, which is an overhead, according to the activity-based costing. Then we go to design changes. Remember, this is the second activity, design changes. That is where our focus is. Then now we go to design changes and we see that the cost of design changes, it is 60,000 based on the number of design changes. How many number of design changes? The number of design changes is 20, which is made of 8 for product special and 12 for product common. Let us make sure that is very clearly and is visible seen. We have 12 number of design for product common and 8 number of design for product special, and the total is 20. Remember, our focus is to get to the total first, and the price we know, or the cost we know, it is 60,000. So we have to say 60,000 divide this by 20 first. We are doing the cost pull rates first. So now this is what we call design changes. We are in design changes. How many times we change the design? We said total design changes cost is 60,000, divide by 20. And when we divide this by 20, remember 20 being the total of the design changes for product common and special. 60,000 divide this by 20, we get 3,000. I want to highlight this per design change. Per design change. For every change in the design, it will be 3,000 per design change. So now we need to allocate this to product common. How much will be allocated to product common? If the rate is 3,000 per design change, how many design changes does the product common has? The design changes of product common, it is 12 of them. There we do have the design changes for product common. Just to clear again, the number of design changes for product common, it is 12. Therefore now we multiply by 12. Remember, the 12 is inside that 20, don't forget. So now we times this by 12 and it gives us 36,000 rands. Then we go to the second product, which is product special, and we still have the same rate. Our rate does not change. We multiply, obviously if we take 12 in that 20, the remainder will be 8. And where is that 8 coming from? It is the number of design changes for product special that we multiply by the rate now. So now we multiply this by 8, and let me first divide this by 12. It gives me 3,000 times this by 8. It will be 24,000 rands. Make sure that when you say 24,000 plus 36,000, it gives you 60,000, which is the amount that you were allocating using the cost drivers. So 36 and 24,000 is what is to be recorded. 36,000 and 24,000. So now we have 36,000 and we have 24,000 rands. Then now remember, these are totals. We need to divide their total with the number of units in order for us to get to the cost per unit. So now we go to the second one, which is, or the third one, which is purchasing. Then now let us go to our purchasing, and we are now doing purchasing. We need to know how much is the cost of purchasing overhead, or the overhead purchasing cost, because this is a manufacturing overhead. Then now we look at the purchasing, and we see that purchasing is a total of 50,000 rands. Then now we say purchasing is 50,000 rands. Remember, this is the rand value. It is based on the number of purchase orders. We need to look at the number of purchase orders. 80 plus 120 is equal to 200. So we are focusing on the total first that we divide with. So we have 50,000. We have 50,000 that we divide by 200. And by doing that, it will give us the rate per purchase order. 50,000 divided by 200, it gives us 250 per purchase order. Then now the question is, how many purchase orders did Product Common had? This is 250 per purchase order. I want to confirm that it was 200. Yes, we're 280 and 120. Then we say, how many purchase orders did Product Common had? The number of purchase orders for Product Common is 80. For Special, it is 120. So now we continue on that same note. We are now allocating this cost, which this rate, which is 250 times this by, let me say it was 80. Just confirm that, just slip in my mind. Yes, it was 80 for product. Then the second one, which is special, it was 120. So now we times this by 80, and it gives us 20,000 rands. Then obviously for product special, it will be 30,000 rands. Why am I confident? Because the total amount that I was allocating to these two products is 50,000. So now product special will definitely have to be 30,000 rands. And to say the rate of 250 times this by 120, then 250 times this by 120, it is 30,000 rands. So now you can see the confirmation. 30 plus 20,000 will be 50,000. Here we have 20,000, and here we have 30,000 rands. Then now we go to another activity, which is another overhead, in other words, which is quality control. Now we are doing quality control. We are doing quality control, and we know that we first have to calculate the rate And for us to calculate the rate of the quality control, we need to know the cost of the quality control. And the cost of the quality control, it is 48,000. And what is the cost driver? The cost driver is the number of product tests. So now if that is the number of product tests, we need to go and check the number of product tests. Then now we look and see that the number of product tests, it is 300, 700, and the total is 1000. And we are looking for the total first in order for us to get the rate, because we need the rate for the two products. Then after we allocate according to the number of product tests to product common, and allocate according to the number of product tests to product special. So now we have the total of 48,000 that need to be divided by the total of 1,000. So now we have 48,000. Divide this by 1,000. And by doing that, let us see how much we are getting. We have the 48,000. Divide this by 1,000. It will be 48 rand. This is 48 rand per quality control. Let me confirm that quality control was based on the number of product tests. Yes, based on the number of product tests. So that will be 48 rand per product test. 48 rand per product test. The cost of testing a product, in other words, is 48 rand. Then we say how many product tests were done for product common. Then that will be 48 times this by 300, because they had only 300 tests for product common. And where do I get that information? There we do have number of product tests. It was 300. So I multiply by 300, and that which is the number of product tests for product common, and this becomes 14,400, being the number of or the total cost of overhead for quality control. Then we go to product special. And product special is 48 times this by 700, and 48 multiply this by 700, it is 33,600. And if you say 33,600 plus 14,400, we get 48,000. Remember, 48,000 is the amount that we were allocating. So there's no way we can allocate more or less than what we were allocating. So it has always to add up to that 48,000 rands, and I've been emphasizing that to you continuously. 14,400 and 33,600. Then now we have 14,400 and 33,600. Then we go to the other overheads. The other overheads don't have space, then I have to go to the next page. Then the other overheads, if you remember, it was based on the labor hours. And the total of the other overheads, I think, was 140,000. And the total labor hours was 10,000. I will show you that now. 140,000 divided by 10,000. This will be 14 rand per labor hour. 14 rand per labor hour, or per direct labor hour. Per direct labor hour. And the question is, how many labor hours did we have for product common and product special? Now let me confirm. The other overheads is 140,000, and it is based on direct labor hours, and we are looking for the total direct labor hours. Our direct labor hours was 6,000 plus 4,000 equals 10,000. So hence I divided by 10,000, and I got my rate. Then now I need to multiply that rate of 14 by 6,000 and multiply it by 4,000 for product special. So now I need to allocate that. Then it will be product common, and product common, it will be 14 times this by 6,000 hours, and for product special it will be 14 times this by 4,000. Then now we say 14 times by 6,000, it will be 84,000 rands, and 14 times this by 4,000, this will be 56,000. And if you say 56,000 plus 84,000, this should be 140,000. So now I just want to confirm that the labor hours are 6,000 is to 4,000. So now meaning the 84,000 and 56,000 will then be recorded. 84,000 and 84,000 and 56,000 and 56,000. Just confirm 84 plus 56, 140,000. So now we have that 84,000 and 56,000. Therefore now the overheads have been calculated using the activity-based costing. But I want to first bring your attention to the fact that we need to calculate the total for these overheads before we divide them by the cost per unit. If you want, you can say divide by 6,000, divide by 6,000, but it takes time to divide them individually. Divide by 6,000 to get to the cost per unit for each of them. But that is not my preferred approach. I first prefer to calculate the total overheads. Then after I divide them by the number of units. Then after I will say number of units, which is 6,000 and 2,000. 6,000 and 4,000 or 2,000. Let me just confirm that too. Yes, it is 2,000. 6,000 and 2,000. So this will be divide by 6,000 and divide by 2,000 units. Therefore, this will give me the cost per unit that I'm looking for. Then now let me do the total. It will be 30,000 for product common plus 36,000 plus 20,000 plus 14,400 plus 84,000. It is 184,400 divide by 6,000. It is 30 rand 73 cents. 50,000 plus 24,000 plus 30,000 plus 33,600 plus 56,000. This is 193,600. Divide this by 2,000 units. Then the cost per unit becomes 96 rand 80 cents. Just to recalculate, 30,000 plus 36,000 plus 20,000 plus 14,400 plus 84,000. 184,400, divide this by 6,000. Yes, 30,000.73 plus 60 equals, then my cost per unit of product common will be 90 rand 73 cents. For the second product, just to confirm again the total, 50,000 plus 24,000 plus 30,000 plus 33,600 plus 56,000. 193,600 divide by 2,000 units. Yes, 96 rand 80 cents plus 150 plus 55, 301.80 cents. So now this will be what was required, the cost per unit for each of the product. Now, as I said to you that to some of the questions you might be required to compare the cost per unit using the traditional method and the ABC method. Now, in this case, if we look at just random comparison, we have 90 rand 97 cents in the ABC. Remember, ABC is said to be more accurate in terms of allocating cost, but here they have 97 rand 80 cents, but we have how much? 90 rand. So they allocating overheads using traditional method in this common product, it makes our cost per unit to be overstated because it's 97 rand 80 cents instead of 90 rand 73 cents. And now when it comes to the special product, the cost per unit is 280 rand 60 cents, but when it comes to ABC, it is 301 rand 80 cents. As I said to you once again that ABC is more accurate in terms of allocating overheads using those activities and cost drivers. So now meaning the traditional method is underestimating the cost per unit of product special, meaning the very close to accurate cost per unit of product special should be at around the 301 rand 80 cents. So now that is how we will normally do the comparison between these two methods. And now those were the two requirements that were required of us in this question. And I hope you have understood something in terms of the topic of ABC. I will come again with another question on ABC. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure that you get updates on the videos that I upload so that you can get some resources and listen to them and my audios and get to pass and be a graduate one day. Let me say thank you. God bless you.